Hey guys, thanks for coming back. I appreciate it. I really do. Only got a few minutes while my lovely wife is going to pick up our youngest son from school, so I wanted to run in here and record my quick intro. It's quick because not only am I short on time, but because the interview was just over an hour and a half, so it's a big one. We cover a lot of different topics. I think it's the best one so far. Granted, this is only the 6th episode and the 3rd guest. I think it's definitely the most in tune with how I want things to go, how informative I want it to be and diverse. Today's guest, she covers her paranoia, her depression, coping with losing a spouse, raising a daughter by herself, trying to maintain her own sanity and figure herself out as a person, figure out where she fits after the death of her husband. So it's very endearing. I learned a lot from her, about her. Her name is Linda Anthony Hill, and she is an author of, I believe, 4 books now. I'll talk more about that after the show. And then there will also be links in the description of the episode for you to go and check out her books. But enough of my talking. Let's get on with it.
Good afternoon, I guess.
Good afternoon. Okay, we were just discussing how you're feeling today.
Yes.
And you said you're feeling a little manic.
Yeah.
And whenever I think manic, I think that has a negative connotation to me.
Well, it when they say manic depressive, manic is up, depressive is down. So when you're manic, you're on top of the world. You can do anything, or you feel like you can do anything. Mm-hmm. You feel like, I can order this $5,000 piece of equipment. I'll be able to pay it back because it's going to produce this much money. And, you just, and it all makes sense. When you're manic, that whole argument of why you can do this makes sense, and you do it. And then a month later, or a week later, or a day later, when the depression side hits, you're like, what have I done? Or even when you just level out, because, there's times when you're level and you're just, how am I going to pay this?
Is that same level of manic like delusionary too, where you're like, I could fly if I jump off this building? Like, could you be that?
I've never been that manic.
Yeah.
I know I can't fly.
See, whenever I think manic, I think that, I know I can't.
Not that delusional. I have delusions, but I'm not that delusional ever.
I'm sure some are.
Possibly so. My little brother decided that he could fly, and he flew from one swing set to another. Of course, he ended up at the hospital with a broken arm because he couldn't fly. But he was probably 6 or 7, and we're all manic when we're 6 or 7. We can do anything.
We're all invincible.
We're going to live forever, and we're invincible. They're a good example of it.
Being young, and
they just have figured out how to do enough things that they feel like, oh my God, I can do anything.
I think I've been thinking about being manic too wrong all this time, because I always thought if I go a few days without taking antidepressants, I thought I was feeling manic and being very energetic, high energy, and all over the place, but at the same time realizing that it's not real. No.
I wish that were true.
Could save some money.
I really could. No, when you're manic, it is a delusional thing. And I hadn't really thought about it, but it is. And it's funny, you can know it about yourself. You can know that you do this and still do it. Still let yourself talk yourself into insane shit that just makes no sense. And what do? You get on meds, and even meds only slow it down a little bit.
So, I mean, what causes it? Is it just...
It's the other side of depression.
Right. But I mean,
bipolar situation. What causes it? It's just like clinical depression, Joe. Nothing causes it.
It's just an imbalance.
It happens. When you least expect it, now you're depressed.
Yeah.
And you're too depressed to function anywhere.
So it's just the polar opposite.
Yeah.
Is manic.
Yeah. You're manic. You know you're manic, but you're manic.
Yeah.
You're high as a kite. I can do anything. There is no problem with signing this contract that my brother, the lawyer, has recommended not to sign because you're only getting 20% of the net, which can effectively be zero if you're dealing with an unscrupulous company. But you're so manic that you see the figures and say, I'm going to hit that number and it'll be that number and everything will be fine. And you sign the contract.
And you're okay.
And you have a publisher.
Okay. Now I see.
Yes, now you have a publisher. I have come to find out that it's as good a contract as you get in the publishing world. 20% of net is right up at the top of what the artist gets, which is insane.
And we have the rights to Survival, by the way.
Oh, cool.
They reverted back to me and Kevin. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So are you going to do anything with it?
I don't know.
Oh, you should.
I thought about re-editing it, but I just I don't have it in me right now. I'm really enjoying this, and I'm trying to stay fast on the book. Trying to stay focused on both of those, and doing this is a big task and a big overtaking.
It's a big task, but it's
lot.
also probably as therapeutic as writing the book.
It's probably more so because it's all personal. Like the book is very personal, but I'm also writing it through fictitious voices. This is all me.
Yeah.
And who I'm talking to. And I get that quick gratification too every week. And that's nice because I thrive on that.
Yeah. And you certainly don't get that from a publication.
or making movies. You had your convention.
A festival in Denison. And I had a display of my books and things about Hill House. It's a display. It's like I now have a display. I know when I get there exactly what goes where and, how to set it all up and put the signs up and everything. And it was a very slow crowd because it was a 7-block long festival and we were at one end.
I thought this was the horror convention that you mentioned.
No, that's going to be in July.
Okay.
I think I'm at a horror convention. Maybe that's also in July.
But this was a street festival, just like
yes.
Okay,
yes,
cool.
This was like the street festival. It's the Doc Holiday Saints and Sinners Festival in Denison, and there was a lot of people at the festival, but not many of them made it all the way to the end of the block that we were at. We were at the train depot, inside the train depot. So it was a slow day. As festivals go, I mean, I'm used to having people walking by constantly, and I might be able to get one of them occasionally come over, talk about my books, and maybe even buy one. I still sold books, but it wasn't as brisk as I had expected. But one little girl came up, and she was talking to me, and I saw her father lean in and whisper in her ear, and I could see what he was doing. He said, you're talking to the author. And she said, what? He said, she's the author. Her eyes got so big and she got all excited and she's, oh my God, you're Linda Anthony Hill? I said, yes. And I'm still over here thinking, you got me confused with somebody else, but I'm not that famous. And she's going, oh.
Is she like 8?
No, she's 10? Probably 10 or 11. She says, I've read all your books they have them at our school library, and I've read all of them, and I love them, and I love you. And she just, she was beside herself. She had to have her picture taken with me. She had to give me hugs. It was all this. I mean, that's the first time I've met a fan. It was the first time I had met someone that I didn't already know that was a fan.
That's a cool feeling, isn't it?
It is wonderful.
It's a real high.
Yes, it's part of my mania right now. I'm still high on that because it was awesome. And then I was walking across. I had another friend who was displaying, and she was on the other side of the building. And I was walking across to say hi to her, and someone yelled, Miss Hill, which I'm not accustomed to, from a table where they were eating. And she raised up the book and she said, I love it, I love it. She had just bought it. I said, you're reading it already? She says, I'm on chapter 3. It's great. I love it. And I'm like, holy shit. This is great. I love it. So I could live like that.
Yeah.
Totally. But I know that it'll smooth back out. Mm-hmm. And I won't have all this coming at me. But I don't know it at the same time.
You're reluctant to recognize it?
Yes. And yet, at the same time, I'm also reluctant to accept that it's me. I'm still thinking they're mistaking me for someone else.
So are you reluctant to accept, like, their love? Or are you just not wanting that compliment?
I don't know.
Like, you don't feel like you're worthy of
Right.
of what they're giving you?
Right.
The positivity and...
Right. Well,
Okay.
the admiration and it's still hard for me to accept that I wrote a really good book. I was conditioned to accept that I was not anybody special or definitely not exceptional. Anything I did was okay. There's a story with Dell where I never sing. And Dell sings a lot. He sings on stage. He's an excellent singer. And I don't sing. Well, I sang in the choir for 12 years coming up. And then I stayed on in the choir for a year or two after I graduated. In high school, I was in Glee Club, but I was also with the church choir. And they had me do a solo one year at Christmas, at Midnight Mass, which is a big deal, right? And I was so nervous I went out and got drunk. But that's another story. I've self-medicated my whole life. Dell was saying something about my singing, and I said, I can't sing. And he said, no, you have a nice voice. I said, no, I can't carry a tune in a bucket. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, my mother always told me I can't carry a tune in a bucket. That, singing is not something I should do. Even though I had done it, but I had done it as part of a choir, so that my sucking didn't stand out, basically is how I felt.
You were a low-level or mediocre cog in a machine of mediocrity that together kind of sounded
good.
Yeah.
Sounded real good. People hired us,
But you had a solo.
That I didn't show up for.
Oh.
Because I was so drunk.
Oh, so I thought you got drunk after you did the solo.
No,
you got drunk for the nerves.
Right, before. And then I got
wow.
so drunk, I was outside the church puking when I should have been inside the church singing.
Wow.
Yeah. But I couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. How was I going to do a solo?
Wow.
Right. And I got a lot of that. You're not good enough. You're not good enough for that. Don't even think about that. You're not good enough for it. And then at 17, it was, where are you going? What are you going to do?
With your life or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you're not staying here. You're out of high school. If you're going to college, you can stay here. If you're not, get out. It wasn't even pay rent. It was get out. So I went to school for 6 months. And it was a technical school. And I found a job in that field where they would train me for free instead of me paying for school, which it ended up you had to pay for the whole year anyway. But I was out of school and into a career, and I stayed in that career for 45 years. I was a dental technician for 45 years. And I didn't even think about the things that, I shouldn't do or couldn't do. The singing, that opportunity never arose again to sing for anybody or for anything. I moved to a different town where I didn't know anybody. I moved to Atlanta. There were no opportunities to sing with anybody there, and I certainly wasn't going to sing by myself. So that died. Writing, I've been writing since I was a child. Since I learned to write, I started writing poetry. I would write short stories. I had a newsletter for the neighborhood when I was about 10. And my father supported that. He was a writer.
That's cool.
Not a professional writer, but an amateur writer. It's not like he was I'm going to write someday. He wrote newsletters.
Mm-hmm.
He
wrote things that he enjoyed?
Yes.
Hobbyist?
Yes.
Kind of thing?
Yes. And so he encouraged me to do anything that had to do with writing. Like he got me a book to put my poetry in, and the newsletter, he helped me. He provided paper and let me use his typewriter, because back then we didn't have computers and things. We had a Royal typewriter, bang, bang, bang,
Mm-hmm.
bang, bang. And you had to make photocopies. And he helped with that. And it was like a newspaper, because it had sections. It had a joke section, and it had might have had a crossword puzzle section, and who's doing what, gossip section, and sports section for all the kids in the neighborhood that were in sports, and in sports, not about the big sporting world, but about the kids in the neighborhood and what their teams were doing.
Were you going out there and getting all the stories, or?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Well, my brothers were 3 years apart from each other, so they all played baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And they all played in different leagues because they were different age groups. So I was at the ball fields all the time. And the same thing for basketball, and the same thing for football. We ran to all these different places all the time, so I could keep up with a lot of it. And it didn't last long. I don't even remember how many issues there were. There weren't that many issues. But the fact that I did it,
mm-hmm.
and I did it with my father's help.
It's huge.
Is huge. And I guess I was around 10 or 12 years old when I had a poem published. Now, come to find out later that it was a vanity press kind of thing. They would come to the school, or they would run a contest, and teachers would submit students, and every student who submitted won, basically, and got into this book that they had to pay $15 for, which back then was like $150.
Yeah.
And that's how they made their money, was selling books to the students whose poems were in the book.
What a racket.
And we couldn't afford to buy the book. So I don't even have a copy of myself published nationally.
What did they charge for the book back then? If it was $15 to get published in it.
It was the $15 got you a copy of the book.
Oh.
Otherwise, you had just contributed a poem to the book.
Gotcha.
For free.
Okay.
Because they didn't pay for anything. But they formatted it and published it, and I don't know if it was any good or not, because I never saw one. I never saw a copy of it.
That's funny.
Yeah. But it made me a published poet,
mm-hmm.
in my mind. And then on the entrance exam for my high school, it was a private, it was a Catholic church,
mm-hmm.
School and high school. And you had to take an entrance exam before you got into the high school. And I was sitting there doing the entrance exam, and I finished up like 20 minutes early. And I asked if I could leave, and they said no. So I just had to sit there with everybody for 20 minutes. So I wrote a poem. And it was a really good poem. And I don't have a copy of it anymore. It got lost along the years, moving from place to place. You know how you lose things.
Mm-hmm.
It was even worse back then because they were paper copies. You had to physically carry it with you. But they published that poem in the school's newspaper as...
the school that you were taking the entrance exam to? Okay.
Yes. As an example of the quality of students that were testing this year. That she had time left over to write this poem while doing the entrance exams. And of course I got in the highest group of... They split things up so that lower skills got you in a lower group of students for your same year. Mm-hmm. Now we're talking about a whole school had 400 students. A 4-year school had actually less than 400 students, because ours was the largest class to date, and it had 104 students in it, in the class.
It was a private school?
And it was a private school. And they actually, out of those 100 students, turned it into, A, B, and C levels. Mm-hmm. And I started out in the A level because of the testing. I do wonderfully on tests. People wonder why I think I'm psychic. I know the answers. I don't have to study. I can look at a question and know what the author of the question expects the answer to be. Not what the answer is, but what they want the answer to be. I've scored so high on the SATs and the, what's the other one, ACT? Mm-hmm. I scored so high on those. I would have had scholarships, except that I hadn't applied myself in school, and I had an 84 average, and you had to have an 85 average to get a scholarship, so I missed it by 1 point over 4 years. Testing is easy for me. I can take tests all day long, but the actual grades for doing the stuff that you do, mm-hmm. I fall down on that. So they put me in with the eggheads, and I couldn't keep up. I didn't really understand the material. I could take the tests.
You could pass the test, but the day-to-day,
I couldn't do it.
You couldn't keep up with
I didn't understand what we were doing, but I could pass a test on it. Mm-hmm. So my grades were so low, I said, this is, they said, we're gonna move you down a notch. Not all the way down, but we're going to move you down a notch. And that made all the difference. That, my grades came up. But that first year was bad enough to bring me down to an 84 overall and keep me from scholarships.
Now, back then, whenever you were in school, were you manic depressive then?
Oh, yeah. I was on...
when did that all start for you, like that you noticed?
Well, I had ulcers when I was 7.
From stress? From worrying?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
How did you have that kind of stress and worry at that age?
I don't know, but the doctors told my parents that when I said I had a stomach ache because they asked me to do the dishes for 6 people at 7 years old, if I said I had a stomach ache, I actually had a stomach ache. Mm-hmm. It was too much. They were asking too much of a 7-year-old, because I would babysit my little brothers. I would cook dinner once a week.
At 7?
At 7. When they were going out, it wasn't a great dinner. It was just, it was probably just, like, I remember making a cheese toast thing that was pretty good, actually. The kids loved it. And I learned how to make spaghetti very young, so that I could fix dinner, because that was their night out, was Friday night. So apparently I was under a bit of stress that early. It doesn't seem like it. I look back at it and it doesn't seem like anything all that stressful.
As an adult, from an adult perspective.
It doesn't seem that stressful. Okay, so you had to babysit a couple of babies. What's the big deal? Well, I was only 7.
Yeah, you were still a baby. I mean...
And I keep thinking, surely I was older than that. But I know that it was 6 or 7, because this goes to the Catholic Church now. Mm-hmm. I was brought up Catholic Church, very strict. And they do communion on Sundays. Well, they do communion every day. The Catholic Church does. But at age 7, well, actually 2nd grade, and I would have turned 7 by the time they did it, yeah. You had your first communion. You weren't allowed to go for communion until you'd had your first communion, and you had to study certain things and do certain things before you could participate in first communion. And you had to fast from midnight until your communion. So maybe I was a little older than 6 or 7. I may have been 8 or 9. Mm-hmm. I was old enough for communion, and I got sick because I'd gone so long without any food. Ulcers are simply not eating. That's what causes ulcers. It's not stress that causes the ulcer. It's not eating that causes the ulcer. But if you're the type of person that doesn't eat when they're stressed, ulcer.
Gotcha.
Because you didn't eat. And I used to forget to eat all the time. Hell, I used to forget to breathe. People would walk up to me at the lab and say, Linda, breathe. Because they could see me over there working away and not breathing.
Yeah, I remember we used to have to tell you, we're going to go get you something at Sonic. What do you want? Nothing, I'm fine. You got a penchant for chocolate shakes. I'll get you a chocolate shake. And you're like, all right, that'll do until dinner.
Eating has always been just, filling up the tank. It was never we're going to eat something. I never got that. Probably because my mother couldn't cook. So I grew up with food that was less than desirable. I never realized that steak could taste good until I went on a cruise when I was 16. I saved up for this weekend cruise. Now, we were in Florida. We were just a couple hours from Miami, and the boats went out of Miami to go down to the Bahamas and back for 2-night trips. And my boyfriend was working on the cruise ship. So I went on a cruise, and there was steak one night, and it had mushrooms over it, and I tried it, and it was delicious. I thought, oh my God, I thought I didn't like steak. But it was just, no, Mom pan-fried steak and called it, here's steak.
Was it just like the little, very
the thin steaks,
ones?
and she'd pan-fry them, and here you're eating steak, and I'm like, okay.
Then you get to this cruise, and it's a
It's
or a T-bone
steak.
with all the good stuff on it.
Mushrooms and wonderfulness everywhere. It's just, oh my God, I had no idea. That was fun. Once again, but what I was going to say way back was I had the ulcers. They put me on something for my thyroid, which brightened my mood. Somewhere around the age of 12, they decided, because my mother pushed, that I had hypothyroidism, which is low energy, and low mood, because with low energy comes low mood. And my mother had read about it in Women's Day or something, so I must have it. I went through so many doctor visits because Mother read something in a woman's magazine. I recognize those symptoms. That's my daughter. I'm taking her to the doctor. And off we'd go for tests. And I had whatever it was, and they would treat me for it. But that one, I called them my happy pills, and I would take more than allotted because I just carried the bottle around with me. And the prescriptions back then were so much different from the way they are now. I mean, yes, you had to have a prescription, but the doctor would write it if you asked. We weren't doing opioid. Well, no, we're thinking about it. They used to have a pill called a Darvon. Some of us knew that if you took a Darvon apart, it was a capsule. There was a little lump in it, like a little bitty marble-like thing, except it was not a marble. It was the good stuff, the codeine, or the hydrocodone, or whatever. I think it's codeine. So we would get rid of the rest of it and just take the lump and get the high from it. They caught on to that, and then they started making Darvocets, which were not a capsule. They were a pill. And you couldn't pull out the good stuff. You had to take the stuff that...
Take the good and the bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it still accomplished the same thing, but it was just...
Not as quick.
Or
enjoyable?
Not as enjoyable.
Okay.
There's the...
So you didn't find pleasure in food, you found pleasure in prescriptions.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I self-medicated, like I said, from an early age.
From 12, whenever you got your happy pills.
Got my happy pills. If I wasn't feeling happy, I would take one of my happy pills, and everything would be fine. And I'd probably still be doing that today if I still lived in Florida, but I moved to Georgia.
What moved you to Georgia?
I moved to Georgia because of school. I went to school in Atlanta.
Okay.
And you can't get a prescription filled in another state from the prescribing doctor that's not in that state. So at first, I just let Mom get my prescriptions filled in Florida, and I would go home once a month and have the pills. But then I quit school, and I wasn't going home once a month, and
You're staying in Georgia still?
I was staying in Georgia. Yeah, I stayed in Atlanta. And I couldn't get the doctor to prescribe. He wasn't like my earlier physician. Mom couldn't just say, she's got this, prescribe for her. No, it wasn't that simple. This guy actually ran a test, and said, you don't have hypothyroidism. Yes, I do. I've been taking these pills for years. By this time, I was like 20 or 18 or something. And
So close to a decade you've been taking your happy pills.
right, he said, you're going to be lucky if your thyroid hasn't atrophied. What we're going to do is we're going to take you off of them and hope that your thyroid kickstarts in.
Wow. So the happy pills were making your thyroid shut down?
Sure.
Wow.
Thyroid didn't need to produce anything. I was supplying it.
Gotcha.
So I don't know if it ever kicked in or not. I've had tests done since then, because I would love to go back to just taking those happy pills. That was the easiest thing to do. That's an idea. Maybe I'll talk to my shrink about that. Can I just take thyroid pills? That would be better than some of the pills I'd have to take. But anyway, it wasn't until a few years ago when I had they don't call them nervous breakdowns anymore. They call them mental breakdowns. And I had a mental breakdown.
When was this?
A few years ago.
Okay.
4, 5 years ago. And it was bad enough that Dell took me to the doctor. The doctor wanted to put me in the hospital. Dell was ready to go along with that, and I was just like, no. Please don't let them put me in a hospital. Please don't let them put me
Like
in a
a
hospital.
psych ward?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so finally he said, look, I won't let her out of my sight. They wanted to medicate me and see what happened in a controlled environment where they could say, well, it's not working, we need to try this, and, do their experiments and shit. And Dell said, I won't let her out of my sight, because they were also concerned that I might commit suicide.
Were you feeling suicidal at the time?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
That's what started the whole thing.
Really?
Yeah.
What brought you to that point?
We had bought some properties in Gainesville, and the city slapped a condemnation notice on one of them that produced a good bit of money every month for us. But the tenants moved out and left a mess, and we hadn't had a chance to clean it up. It was like the day after they moved out, the city put this condemnation notice on the building. And there was nothing wrong with the building. Nothing wrong with the building. It was just, it looked really bad because of all the trash. They had moved everything out of the house, but hadn't moved everything out of the yard. And it was just very trashy looking. We would have people on it that weekend, but not that day. But there was no point.
The house got slapped with a condemnation, and they had all their stuff was out on the front yard.
Yes, and that's the reason they
Condemned it,
basically. And we fought it. We went to the mayor and had a talk with him. We went to the city manager and, pleaded with him. We had one final meeting. No, we had a meeting with the inspector. This was Dell and I were meeting with them, trying to salvage it. And this day, we were supposed to meet with somebody about it. And I was freaked out. I was freaking out.
So what if it's condemned? Then the house has to come down?
Yes.
Okay. And then what happens to the land?
The land is still vacant.
Is it yours?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The city doesn't get the land, but they hope that you'll donate it to the city, which we're not going to do I don't care what happens.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care what happens.
That's
the
just
city
spite.
does not get to touch that land for any reason. But okay. I'm paranoid. One of the things I take medication for is paranoia. Now, when you suffer from paranoia, you see consequences years into the future of everything that goes on around you. What if so-and-so does such and such and tells so-and-so about that, and this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and there's this whole mountain of stuff that could happen from me picking up this glass and taking a drink at this time.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you live, is in the future, but it's not a good future. It's a horrible future. So what I saw was them condemning that house, and then condemning the house next to it, and then condemning the house across, which we own, and condemning the house across the street from it, which we own, and condemning the house behind that, which we own, and our entire retirement being torn down around us. That's where my mind was that morning.
That's what paranoia was doing to you?
Yes.
How long have you been paranoid?
I can remember back in my teens, early 20s, never taking the same route 2 days in a row to get from point A to point B.
Why?
People might be watching.
Really?
Yeah. Seriously.
So with paranoia then, because that's, I mean, my extent is sometimes somebody might be watching me, but that's, I think that's almost normal these days because there's cameras everywhere, so somebody is watching you.
Yeah, they definitely are now.
Or like,
I feel at home now. See, I had paranoia like that back when they didn't have those little cameras.
Right.
So people watching.
Man. And no matter what, you're seeing all of the trails from one action branching out to all these different timelines.
Yeah.
and
You're literally seeing different timelines,
and they're all
of
dark.
Things that can go wrong.
And so it's never you never see one that's going to be right when you're paranoid.
No.
You see everything that's going to go wrong.
All the things that are going to go wrong. If you could, what you try to do, what the books tell you to try to do, and they don't understand, they tell you to try to focus on that one path that things are going to go right. And just focus on that. But they don't know how hard that is when you have all these other paths drawing at you, pulling at you. Look what could happen. Look what could happen. This one of look what good could happen is like a fucking fairy tale. I'm sorry. It's like a fairy tale of Mother Goose or something. I mean, it's just like that is fantasy. These things are real. These things could really happen. That's a fantasy. The good stuff.
So paranoia is just
It's insidious.
Ugh.
I didn't know I had paranoia. Now I'm taking different routes to get to work every day from 3 blocks away.
You thought you were being sensible. You were being logical. That's normal.
That's right.
That's one thing that I'm figuring out right now with myself and a lot of things, reflecting back to my childhood, going, that's not fucking normal.
Right.
Like these things that I've for the past 30 years gone, well, that's normal because that's how I grew up. That's how this is how I was treated. That's what happened to me. These are the consequences. Not normal.
Not normal. No.
So
no.
Yeah, that's wild.
But I did not know about the paranoia until after I had the breakdown, which has only been a few years ago.
Wow.
They had me on medication, and it wasn't working that well for depression and anxiety. And I was required to go to a social worker once a week and have a session. And after a few weeks, we were having a session, and she had gotten to know me a little better. And I said something just very nonchalant, and she said, "Oh my God, you have paranoia." "Why do you say that?" And she explained to me, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's me."
Wow.
She gave me the book definition.
So from your teens until about 3 or 4 years ago,
Paranoid.
normal, paranoid, but in your head, normal,
Totally normal.
logical thinking,
Yes,
reasonable,
absolutely.
and then you had your mind blown 4 years ago
Yeah,
by saying this is what you are.
yeah.
Wow.
It was identified. There's a medication for it, and it helps. And if I skip that medication, I can feel the paranoia
Feel it creeping.
creeping in. And I go, okay, I better get back on those meds.
That's if I lose out on
when-
the antidepressants for a couple days,
Oh, yeah.
then I feel the creeping back. And whenever we were trying CBD oil, I made the mistake. I didn't know this is what it was supposed to. I thought that I was supposed to cold turkey the meds and just do the CBD.
Oh, my God.
So I did that. So a week later,
Yeah.
I'm freaking out. Like
Sure.
I'm having a panic attack. And
Sure.
I talked about this on another episode where it was like, am I just having extreme withdrawals? Do I need this med? Like I was questioning,
Right.
do I
right.
need to be taking this? That kind of thing. It was a mess. And of course, Cynthia was like, just take them. So I took them, and
Take the
within a
freaking
couple
meds.
hours, I was back to level. And I'm like, okay, this is whenever I really start questioning. I'm like, is it because I'm addicted?
Right.
Or
No,
is it
it's not.
because
It's not. It's because you're chemically imbalanced in the first place. That's why we self-medicate. We're trying to offset that imbalance with booze, with drugs, with whatever it takes. We obsess over things because they make us feel better. Like you don't notice your paranoia if you're knee-deep in doing crocheting or needlepoint or something that requires your complete focus and attention. You don't notice the rest of the world and what's going on in the paranoia. So we tend to get obsessed with things. Mm-hmm. Although that doesn't have to be paranoia that you're keeping out. You get obsessed with things to avoid the depression, to avoid any it's another form of self-medication. Mm-hmm. When you grab onto something and I have to be doing this. I have to be doing this. And I've noticed a little bit of that creeping in here lately. I was looking through some things on Amazon, and they had something on soap making, so I've got in my basket some soap making supplies. So you might get soap for Christmas.
Make it decorative, because otherwise it'll dry out my skin.
No, it's glycerin, pure glycerin.
Oh, really?
Won't dry out your skin. Actually, pure glycerin and honey. It'll be good for your skin.
Try it.
Yeah, I got the stuff in my.
See,
order
I've got a
basket.
different way of dealing with it. Whenever I'll look at my tasks, like clean the house,
Yeah,
get that going, and then I'll beeline over to, like, say, the records, and go, okay, well, first I need to go through all my records and see what I can't live without.
Yeah.
Pull those so I can sell them or trade them or do whatever.
whatever. Yeah,
And that, for some reason, becomes top priority.
right.
And to be honest, weirdly enough, whenever Cynthia brought that CBD oil home, and I did it the right way, within a few days, like the cloud was gone.
Good.
So it's been really nice. And that's whenever I start writing. That's whenever I was like, oh, I can do this podcast. And I started realizing what I can do and doing it instead of going,
Right.
I can do that tomorrow.
Right. Well, once they figure out what medications you need, what chemicals need to be balanced, they can do a better job of it than you and I can.
Yeah.
because they have the tools.
But there's so much trial and error. And
Yeah,
then it's
there
also
is.
finding
There is.
a physician that gives a shit.
Right.
Because that's one thing I was talking about on another one with the last time I went to a couple of doctors. It was the first one was a young guy that probably just had a few years under his belt, treated me like I was there scoring pills. Like I was there just to do that.
Right.
And I'm like, no, I'm just asking questions. Like, because that's whenever I was reading something about
Well, you need a
Adderall, maybe
psych.
that could help, that, blah, blah.
You need a psych.
I did. And she quit her practice. And of course, in my mind, I'm going, what did I say?
Yeah. How did I cause this?
What did I do here? And she diagnosed me as ADD, adult ADD, depressive, and of course, anxiety. But whenever I went to the doctor, I went to a doctor that she recommended. And they treated me like shit again. Where they just like, well, you really think you need this? That kind of stuff. I'm like,
It wasn't a psych doctor. It was a family doctor.
What do you mean?
Okay, your psych nurse recommended a doctor for you. It wasn't a psych doctor.
Okay, yeah.
It was a family doctor. You need to see a psych doctor
Okay.
because their
That's what
whole
they do.
practice revolves around people like us that actually need the chemical balance restored.
So they understand that, and
Yes.
they won't treat you like,
Right.
okay.
Right. You need a shrink. I mean, I got lucky, and the family doctor that Dell took me to when I broke down was very aware of chemical imbalances and that this was something real. Of course, the fact that I was sitting in their office bawling for 2 hours, and I don't cry. I rarely cry. I can go years without shedding a tear. So if I'm crying for hours, I have broken down. So this may not have been my first breakdown, but this was the first one that got treated by a doctor.
See, I cried whenever I saw Avengers yesterday. So,
I've cried for one movie in my whole life.
what movie?
Might have been Brian's Song.
I have a lot of father issues, so whenever there's a reconciliation in a movie between two characters, like that, it gets me. It affects me.
You just gave away the Avengers thing.
No, not at all. No, I'm just talking about in general. Like,
Okay.
that's one thing that really affects me whenever that's happening in just about any movie. If I'm into the movie, if
Yeah.
it's something that's in passing, I'm like, but if I'm into the movie, then yeah, that can get me.
I thought of another movie that made me cry,
Aha,
too. But I was crying over my deceased husband. It was Powder,
okay.
which was like a less impactful phenomenon, and yet it impacted me more. I enjoyed Powder more than I enjoyed Phenomenon, but I enjoyed both of them tremendously. I was sitting there watching it in my room, and it just brought me to tears, and I was crying, and I was crying, and I was crying. And your wife was having a slumber party. And she came in, because it was like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. She came in and says, "Can you keep it down? You're embarrassing me." I know.
Is this after he died?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So I got over in the corner where I wouldn't be able to be heard, and I just sat there and whimpered for a while. Never forget that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll make sure she doesn't either.
I remind her of it occasionally. That's just cruel.
Wow. Keep it down. You're embarrassing me.
Yeah. She was 13. 13 or 14 at the time. You know, it was all about her. and her friends, and yeah, those were some rocky years for us.
Yeah.
A few years after he died, those were very rocky years for us. She had to do her little stint with the psychiatrist.
Oh, really?
So did I. But yeah, we went to the psychiatrist. I forget who ordered it. She was surprised that the psychiatrist felt that she needed as much counseling as I did. Cynthia thought she was coming through it fine. She was fine. She just didn't deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And what they said was, at 13 years old is when a girl naturally separates from her father and puts space between her and her father. They said, when she hits 18, that's when you come back to your father. And he's not going to be there. And worse yet, Dell was there when she was 18.
Oh.
Dell had just come into the picture. And she had run off every boyfriend I had between the death of Rusty and meeting Dell. I had gotten to the point where I wouldn't even bring him around the house because she was so despicable with them.
Like what? Just the attitude and yelling at him or cursing?
Yeah, and just rude and showing her a butt.
What?
Not showing her butt, but, showing what an ass she could be. And making it very clear that they were not going to enjoy this relationship.
Mm.
They were going to have to put up with this shit. So I had gotten to where I didn't even bring them around. They didn't come to the house.
And what were you going through mentally during this time, too?
Oh, yeah, I was not in a good place.
Yeah.
I was in a very bad place. Because, one of my paranoias came true. There I was raising a 13-year-old by myself. But I met Dell and I told him that I wouldn't bring him to my house because my daughter would scare him off. And he said, nobody's going to scare me off. I said, no, she'll scare you off. You won't want to be around me. And so he came over, and he was the first man that ever really came down on her for her attitude toward me. She would yell at me. And when I say yell, it's not like when Cynthia says yell.
Mm-hmm.
When I say yell, they're yelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just, sorry.
Really?
I was pretty small. I had been beaten down really small.
The world had just...
Yeah. My whole universe had collapsed, Joe. I was under a pile of rocks that was under a pile of lumber that was under a pile of steel, and I was trying to dig my way out. But my universe had collapsed. And I was very vulnerable. So was she. She just didn't realize it, and she handled it in a different way. We all handle things in a different way. We're handling the same thing, but we're handling it in a different way.
You're kind of buckling down. She is being the aggressor.
Yes.
And just...
Yeah. That's how she deals with it. Mm-hmm. Where I deal with it. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not been my whole life, but I don't like fights and I don't like confrontation. I would just as soon everybody get along and be nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I shy away from anything confrontational. Anyway, it was a rough patch, but Dell stood up to her. She was yelling at me about something, and he came up in her face. He said, as long as I am around, you will not talk to your mother that way. And he just backed her off. And he meant it. And she knew he meant it. And she changed.
From that point.
From that point on, she did not attack me. She'll be snide every once in a while, but she has never attacked me again the way she did back then. And I hope she's not going to listen to this.
She has been listening to each one.
Oh,
so
good.
If you want me to edit out.
Sorry, Cynthia. It's not that my way was the better way to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that hers was a bad way to handle it. It was just the way we handled it.
Yeah.
And hers was probably better for her survival than my way, which was not good for my survival, but I was damaged, before
Yeah.
it happened. I had a whole life planned. You would not recognize me from back then. I was a good little wife. We had dinner every day at a certain time, and we had a schedule, and it was a family, and everything happened at the same time in the same way, and it was just a whole routine, and it was, leave it to Beaver, except that I owned a business and was at work a lot. But it was very leave it to Beaver. When he died, everything was gone. Because that I could see my future. The paranoia was at bay because this was my life. It was a good life, and I could see it into the future. I could see the two of us in rocking chairs on the front porch in our retirement home, and it was good. And then the building came crashing down. When he left, it was just my whole world collapsed. I had no future. Zero. I had no plan for this future. So the paranoia came back strong. And I was just not much of a person.
Came back and said, "I told you so."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's exactly why you cowered down.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I got small. She got bigger. Kudos to her for getting bigger in that situation.
Yeah, that's
because that's a survival skill.
Yeah. Even if she was an asshole.
Yeah.
It's
kudos to her for being able.
That might have been what put her on the path to being such a strong person now.
Yeah.
Because she is.
Oh, she's very strong.
Yes, extremely.
Yeah. Yeah, that was probably a big part of it. Big part of it. I like to think I had a little something to do with it.
I'm sure you did. You were her first victim.
No, she got the entrepreneur spirit from me.
Mm-hmm.
Her father was not an entrepreneur at all.
He was military, right?
Yeah, he was ex-military. If you can be ex and be a Marine, which you can't. So he was military. But he worked in the private sector in the FAA. Mm-hmm. And not as a pilot and not as one of those air traffic control people. He was in the FAA where they went out and checked airplane schools and airplane shops where they fixed airplanes and made sure they were doing things the right way and all that stuff.
Like regulations?
Yeah. Yeah. And he had a 9-to-5 type job, 8-to-5, whatever. And the idea of risking yourself in an entrepreneurial endeavor terrified him.
Because that structure wasn't there, that guarantee.
Right. Somebody else motivating you. You had a goal because it was set by somebody else. You did this. You got this money.
So that structure was built in the military and carried on to his civilian life, so to speak.
Right.
Did he have anything going on mentally? Yeah?
He served in Vietnam.
Okay.
He served in Vietnam where they dropped him off from a helicopter into the areas that they weren't sure whether it was enemy territory or not. And he would radio out and go, "Get me the hell out of here. It is."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He had a lot of... he was a functional alcoholic. When I say functional, he drank all the time, except at work. He would get up in the morning. He would not have anything to drink. He would get ready. He would go to work all day. He wouldn't even have a beer at lunch. But come 4 o'clock, that's when he got off. He worked 8 to 4. come 4 o'clock, he would go to the pub. He would sit around with the guys and drink beer for an hour or two. And then he'd come home, and our bottom 2 shelves of our refrigerator were reserved for beer. And we always had 2 cases of beer on hand. He didn't drink anything harder than that until he got cancer. And then he switched to something a little harder because the beer wasn't good for him. Somehow. He switched from smoking cigarettes to smoking cigars because the cigarettes were killing him. Neither one of them. He had Agent Orange.
Really?
Yeah. Or he had effects from Agent Orange, which I didn't know to try and do anything through the government. And then when I finally did know, it was too late. Anyway, we'd be walking, we'd go camping a lot, in tent camping. And we'd go in big groups. Military people go in groups everywhere they go. They're a big group of people. And we'd be walking along a beach and a helicopter fly over and he'd go, God damn, I can't get away from these goddamn helicopters. Well, he worked on 6 helicopters and a fixed wing. That's what he did every day, was work on helicopters. But he would freak out when we were off work and a helicopter flew over. It just freaked him out. And then he'd go back to being normal and we'd continue walking and everything was fine. And I don't even know if he knew that he had done it. Because I've known Vietnam vets that you could be sitting here having a conversation and all of a sudden... and then continue the conversation as if they never did anything.
Really?
Really. Vietnam fucked some people up.
Yeah.
Bad. I mean, I knew a lot of Vietnam veterans. And they were all, even the ones that looked normal, like Rusty, had something. I would... One time, he fell asleep on the recliner, and I touched him to wake him up to come to bed, and he came out at me like he was still in the jungle. And I feared for my life for a second. It was that bad. And I never, ever tried to wake him again when he fell asleep.
Not even like yelling at him from across
No.
the... Rusty!
No.
Wow.
You fall asleep there, you're sleeping there all night. I'm not getting into that.
Wow.
Now, if he was laid down in a bed, you could touch him and wake him up. But if he was sitting up,
Because there was still something in there probably saying, you're not in your bed, you're not in...
Yeah.
You know, you're not in a comfortable, safe safe spot.
Safe.
Wow.
Yeah. That was a whole generation of totally screwed up guys. Anyway. I learned a lot of things about, I've been trying to fix this my whole life. Something that what it needed was the right combination of medications, but nobody knew that. I even went to a shrink once when I was probably about 25. And I couldn't afford a shrink. And he knew I couldn't afford him. So he said, you need talk therapy. You just need to get a tape recorder and talk about it. But he didn't prescribe me any meds, which he probably needed to. Well, duh, he did need to. Because I didn't just go downhill and get to this point a few years ago. I've obviously been dealing with this my whole life. But it's not as easy to spot, especially paranoia. Because if you're paranoid, you're not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
You're paranoid.
Yeah.
So you're not going to tell anybody.
They might be in on it.
That's right. Or if you're thinking about suicide, you're certainly not going to tell anybody if you're paranoid, because they're going to
stop you.
stop you or try to medicate you with their own medications, or, all kinds of things that you don't want to happen. There's all kinds of things that paranoia will prevent you from doing to get the help you need.
That sounds like it's the worst version of some kind of, like, that kind of, that mental illness that is very prominent. There's depression, there's anxiety. Paranoia sounds like just the devil of the three, because that's what would cause you to, like you said, not talk to anybody.
Right. You won't tell anybody about it, and you have valid reasons for not discussing it. I mean, they all appear to be valid. With depression, you're depressed, and you know that you can't handle this feeling, that something needs to be done. But you also kind of feel worthless,
too, to where you're like, well, I don't want to bother anybody with this.
Yeah.
So, but it sounds way more terrifying to be paranoid. Because that's one thing that I've been thinking about a lot, too, is just not trusting your own brain. Your brain is working against you. Like, the absolute fucked upness of that. Your brain working against you. And it is so powerful. Your brain is powerful. You can convince yourself that you have a cold and develop cold symptoms.
Absolutely.
But
your mother can decide you have appendicitis, and you'll have appendicitis.
Only if
when she gets the whole hospital on board with it, you'll have appendicitis.
Get our appendix out now. We did that last week.
But she's still having the symptoms.
It's still in there. I don't think you got all of it. It burst and split into two.
Oh, it's funny now. It's funny now, but who knows? Maybe that's where the paranoia stemmed from. Seeing her pick up a magazine and wondering what I'm going to have this week.
Oh, Jesus.
What disease am I going to have now?
I mean, that really, it just, like, in all seriousness, that sounds like the most terrifying thing in the world.
It's not fun.
Mildly. Wow.
I tried to get off the medication. Not off, because the medication, unfortunately, for paranoia makes you gain weight. Mm-hmm. So after I gained about 20 pounds, I said, okay, that's it. And I now exercise 3 times a day without fail. I don't care what's going on. I'm on a constant diet. I take a diet pill. I try everything that comes out in the magazines or, on the Facebook and stuff to keep me from gaining weight. I bought that liposuction machine, which was probably when I was in a state of
mania,
yes, because that was quite a piece of equipment. But I've gotten enough use out of it to have paid for it if I could have afforded to go to the people that do that to you in the first place, which I wouldn't have been able to.
And you've had family members on it too.
Yes, This is true. I've had friends and family use it. But I have lost down some and have stopped the gaining weight from it. But I take 2 of these pills a day. So last August when we were on vacation, we were in the camper and we drove up to Canada and drove back down and went over to Mount Rushmore and through Colorado and down through New Mexico and back home. After about a week, I realized how relaxed I was, how much, easier things were. And I thought, maybe I could knock this down to 1 pill a day. So I started just taking 1. And that lasted about 5 days. And then I could feel the paranoia building. And I said, nope, can't go there. Can't go there. Because I'm one of those people, Joe, that I read about shit on the internet, about all the conspiracy theories and all of that stuff, and it is so real to me. Terrifies me. Terrifies me. I have food kits in my house for the apocalypse.
You gave me one for Christmas.
I gave you one for Christmas. I think everyone should have one. Because, lights go out or things break down for a few days. what are you going to do?
Yeah. I will
But
tell you,
I have
honestly, I did not
more.
laugh at that gift.
Good.
I was happy to receive it.
Oh, thank you.
Because I think it's a cool thing to have
Joey
case.
laughed at it.
Of course he did. I have flashlights all over the place. I have a magnet flashlight just so I know there's one on the fridge if needed. There, you can take precautions and still be sane.
Yeah, but I have more than just one of those food kits.
Well,
I have enough to get us by for a month. I stock up. I have enough to get by if nothing goes wrong except the fact that we don't have any money this month for whatever reason. Like a tenant just gave notice and there goes $1,000 a month we're not going to get. Which I'm saying that not as a demonstration, but that actually happened. Last night we had a tenant give notice and it's over $1,000 a month is going to be gone in a month. And you don't rent a house the day that the tenant moves out. So we're going to be a little light for a month or two. And that happens. That's part of being
Entrepreneur.
an entrepreneur. Yeah, you have to put something back for the lean times. But I tend to take it a little further than most because of the paranoia. But the paranoia is under control as long as I'm on the meds. I just have to stay on the meds. And that's sometimes difficult when they're making you gain weight. I mean, I can literally eat nothing for 2 days and gain a pound.
That's crazy.
I have no idea, but I have done this before. I have literally said, that's it. I'm not gaining any more weight, and stopped eating. I had practice as a Catholic because, you fast all day, 1 day a week, and go a couple days with no food and actually gain weight. And that's when I broke down and ordered the liposuction machine. I said, okay, this is I need help. I've got to have some real help at getting rid of this weight.
So
Because diet isn't going to do it.
if you were manic whenever you ordered it, you were feeling pretty low about the weight gain too then.
Yeah.
So you were both at the same time? Wow.
You can be, but it's not usual. Usually if you're manic, you're manic. If you're depressed, you're depressed. I wasn't depressed about the weight gain.
Bummed out.
No, I was pissed.
Oh.
I was pissed. And pissed is at the top level of the red zone, if you remember the zones.
I do.
Yes. It's at the top level of the red zone where you're about to break out into the yellow zone. Pissed is high.
Yeah.
For me at that time, that's actually manic.
Wow.
Where depression would be so depressed that I would just sit around and eat all day. Because what the hell?
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do. Manic is, by God, I can fix this, and I'm going to fix this, and I'm going to find a way to fix this, and I don't care how much it costs, and I'm going to do it anyway, and, So what if I run up my American Express card to $20,000? Who cares?
See, your version of manic sounds like whenever I used to drink too much and get on eBay.
Yes. That's right. That's manic.
Okay.
That's manic.
That's...
I need that. I need that. Oh, that's great. I need that. It's the same thing you just bought. No, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different.
Check the serial number.
I need both of them. Yeah, sure.
If one breaks.
Yeah, I gotta have a backup. Otherwise, when I'm a star, you go to all these extreme places. I'm not kidding.
When everybody knows me.
When I have enough fans that you can't get to me for all the fans that are around me.
I'm going to need one, and I can't get to it.
I won't be able to get to it.
The horde of fans will not leave my front door.
Oh.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah, you have to be careful on both sides of that one. Now, paranoia usually comes with delusional, which I am sometimes, but not bad, and schizophrenia. You often hear those 3 words used together. I write stories and books, and I am every one of those characters when that character is being portrayed in the book. So is that schizophrenia?
No.
I don't know.
I don't think so. I think that's just, that's an author. Like,
yeah.
And it sounds like I'm saying,
I
no,
think
that's normal.
But most of us, from what I can tell from the writers groups that I've joined online, most of us suffer from some kind of mental health issue. And this is therapeutic. Writing is therapeutic.
I can see that.
Although I didn't start writing seriously until after my breakdown, and they got me on meds. Then I started writing seriously. Now, I had published the book, the Hill House Manor, the guest book. But parts of that were written by me, and parts of that were written by people who had stayed the night at Hill House Manor. So it was a collection of stories. I'm the one that formatted it. I put it together to be published, so, I take credit for that. But it wasn't a novel.
Yeah.
It was more of a short story, and not even that, because I've put a lot more work into short stories.
It was a collaboration.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that you could call your own.
Exactly. Exactly. In fact, I had to change it from a fiction to a nonfiction because these people all wrote this down. Whether it's true or not,
that's what
it's not up to me. They wrote it as if it was true. So these are people's truths. It's a nonfiction. I didn't make any of it up. Whereas, I have some short stories and some long stories that I've completely made up from scratch. God knows where these people come from or these situations. I start writing and they come. I don't think that makes me schizophrenic.
I don't think so. I wouldn't consider myself schizophrenic. I don't think anybody's ever intimated that I was. And I think that's an author's tool. That's creativity.
Yeah.
Is being able to insert yourself into each of these characters, because that's just how it is. Whether you listen to any commentary on any movie where the writer is in there, he's going to talk about, well, this character is 20% me, this character is another 20%, but I'd like to think that this one is 60% me. That's really, I experienced a lot of those things, and that's a lot of how I act and reacted to these things. It's the same thing whenever you're writing a book. These characters are all people that have experienced some of your experiences, and you're channeling it through them.
Or they're people that I know, that I'm watching how they react to things and writing about them as a character in a book or a story. But
they're not voices. They're not separate personalities for you.
No.
Exactly. So I don't.
Yeah. Who are we dealing with today? No.
It's not. I don't see that that's schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Is the voices, the personalities and all that.
I do hear voices, but that's another story.
Well, we ran into that in Alabama, right? Didn't you have kind of an episode whenever we're on vacation?
Probably.
When, oh man, I don't even remember what all happened. It was a clusterfuck of a vacation.
Oh, thank God for meds back then. Although I don't know if I was on the paranoia meds back then.
I remember you were talking about you were hearing voices. Voices were telling you things. And I think Del was irritated about something, so he was kind of closed off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Cynthia was kind of like, I
Del's
just don't want to deal with it.
head of the family was being challenged by a newcomer who's gone. Yeah. But I do. Occasionally I do hear voices. And my shrink knows it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've convinced her that most of it is ghosts, which means she's convinced that I'm crazy because I believe that most of them are ghosts.
Well, I've got a question for you now. This is something I keep wanting to ask you about, but always forget to, or just don't have the opportunity because it's a pretty deep issue. Okay, you, for all intents and purposes, are atheist or agnostic? Because I know you were Pastafarian for a while, but that was just kind of that's a cover.
I'm not an atheist, because atheists believe that when you die, you die. Mm-hmm. So I'm not that.
Okay.
I believe that I've been reincarnated many, 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 many times, not always on this planet. So I'm a little bit different from like a Hindu religion, because their reincarnation theory includes maybe being reborn as an insect or an otter or something like that, but it's usually on this planet. Mm-hmm. I have memory of another planet, so I know I've been on more than one planet. Mm-hmm. Do I believe in the traditional God? No. Mm-hmm. Do I believe that there's a universal mind? Yes.
That's kind of where I was. That's where I was kind of going with asking that, just because for some reason, I don't know why. I think it was just because we never really talk about it too much, especially since you've become so heavily involved in Hill House, and become personally invested in a lot of the. I don't want to say lore, but just the spiritual side of it, I guess. Yes. So we haven't talked a lot about that. So my perception was, okay, I remember her saying she was Pastafarian, which like I said, see that as like it's like a haha, yeah. Don't believe in anything. Or agnostic, light agnostic. So that's just what I assumed. So whenever you started legitimately telling me about these ghosts that you talked to or that you spotted, that kind of thing, I was like, okay, so what
exactly
here?
Are you?
Yeah, not so much what are you, because I didn't want to like go, well, this is what you are, but
I'm
just like, well, what's going on here? Like,
I'm a solitary.
Okay.
I don't believe anything exactly the same way anybody else does. I have my own ideas and thoughts about what goes on and why it goes on. And it's always developing.
That sounds more comforting than any religion or any other belief structure for the most part, because then you're not challenged. Your ideas and your way of thinking isn't challenged. You're just saying this is what it is. And that seems like you could take comfort in that.
Yeah.
That seems nice.
Yeah, it is.
That's like it
is.
the warm blanket of belief structure.
Next week, I may change my mind about this. Mm-hmm. Because something may be revealed to me that says, no, that was wrong.
But that's okay, because that's part of your belief structure.
Yes.
Is that
a constant evolution of discovering, which is all the universe is us discovering us. That's my belief. And there are people who believe that, but they don't believe all the same things I do. They would argue with me about ghosts, or they would argue with me about, I don't know what they would argue with me about, but we always find things to argue about. Any group I join isn't quite the same belief system that I have. But again, like you said, my belief system changes. Mm-hmm. And it is comforting. It's very comforting. There's no good or bad. There's no judgment.
You're not having to go to somebody and saying, should I believe this? Is this okay? How does that form of belief structure, how does that coexist with paranoia and manic and depressiveness? Like, how do they coexist?
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Do you think that, like, your belief system was formed out of those things being there, those things existing, and then you going, you know what? The easiest way to do this is to just...
I don't know.
Welcome it all in.
I know I've been a sponge since I was a child, absorbing any knowledge I could find, anywhere I could find it. I want to know what you believe. I want to know what you know. I want to know what's in this book. I want to know everything there is to know. And as you do that, your mind changes. Your opinion changes. The more information you take in, it's just like, I think I wrote about this last week. The more you travel, the more open your mind becomes. The more you realize that opinions are just opinions. Thoughts are things, but they're just someone else's idea, unless they're your thoughts, and then they're your idea. But nothing is carved in stone. I mean, Mount Rushmore is carved in stone, but...
Well, it's the same thing as, you taking a sip and the ripple effect of that.
Yeah.
Your belief structure is based on ripple effect.
Yeah.
Well, if I think this, or if somebody posits this to me, then I could go this way. But if they didn't, I'm going that way.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But I'm not crazy bad, but like, that's like, wow. Like, mind-blowing.
Being able to listen to someone else's philosophy with an open mind is a wonderful thing. To just be open to it. I'm willing to hear about it. I'm willing to experiment with it. I'm willing to see how that fits for me. That's huge. And that's what I try to do. I mean, and I obsess. I'm all in for a while when I'm studying something. I started listening to Alan Watts this week, and so I'm all about Alan Watts. But, a few years ago, I was all about Alan Walters.
I'm just working down the W's.
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. The Allens and the W's. There has to be something that pulls me into it. Something that clicks with me. Like when I was young, Catholics aren't supposed to go to other religions and study them. Catholics are supposed to study the Catholic religion, and that's it. Your soul depends on it. But I was lucky enough to have a teacher in high school, Catholic high school. I'm sure they didn't know he was doing this, but he exposed us to Hinduism, Buddhism, Protestant Christians, Muslim. He encouraged us to study those other religions. And so for a year, I was able to do that without any repercussions. And I kind of got used to it. I will study any religion that's presented to me. I will take it with an open mind and study it. And what I look for is similarities. Between the different religions. Because if it's the same thing in every religion you've ever studied, you have probably found a truth. Universal truth. If the only ones that have come up with this idea is this group over here, it may not be worth keeping unless it resonates with you. They all have something worth accepting and studying. All of them that I've ever studied have some degree, even Pastafarians, because the whole idea of Pastafarians is that you don't take religion seriously. Well, that's a wonderful concept. To have religion and not take it seriously, how many people do that?
Not most of the people that have religion.
Most people that have a religion are hard-nosed you have to believe the way I believe, and you have to go to church, and you have to contribute, and you have to do this, and you have to do this, and you have to do this.
We
and
have
the
a lot of war.
Pastafarians are, if you create something related to Pastafarianism, you're out. No, you can't have a church. Absolutely not. You're out if you build a church. That's why you don't see any Pastafarian churches.
Could you imagine seeing the spaghetti monster instead of a crucifix?
Somebody had somebody did this. They had their driver's license and they claimed that their religion was Pastafarian. Mm-hmm. And they needed to wear a strainer, a noodle strainer on their head during the picture for the driver's license. And they show you a picture. That's a driver's license picture.
Did he get kicked out?
No.
Okay.
No, that's fine. They encourage people to do pictures of, like, if you're just in nature or in somebody's house and you see something that looks like the spaghetti monster, you take a picture of it and you post it. Pastafarian. Not taking yourself seriously is the best religion there is.
Yeah.
So if I had to choose a religion, I'd still choose Pastafarian.
Just based on that one principle.
Yes. You can't take it seriously. Anything. And that's what I forget when I'm not on meds. Is that you can't take it seriously. Any of it. It's not meant to be taken seriously. This is meant to be a fun discovery of who you are. Mm-hmm. Within the all-encompassing universe.
And that was my conversation with Linda Anthony Hill. If you're interested in checking out the books she's written, you can find them on Amazon. She's written The Anchor is the Key, an award-winning cozy mystery, I believe she's coined that phrase, or one of her critics has. I believe she absolutely adores. And then she's also written the Brandon's Ghost series, which is a collection of children's books. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right because I haven't read this one. I just found out about this one. Series Kath, about a young African girl. And then she's also working on her next novel, The Spider House. Check those out. And I did mention some CBD oil earlier. If that's something that interests you, it's definitely helped me with my brain fog. Hit me on Facebook, send me an email. I can get you some more information. Other than that, I think that wraps it up for this week. Actually, no, I have one more thing to spill about. The official Animal Rights March is August 17th. 2019 in Dallas, Texas. It's a coordinated worldwide march run by the London-based animal rights organization Surge. If you want, go out there, support them, support your love of animals and creatures. Because, I'm pretty sure they're not backed by PETA. So I'm going to go with that and say that they're not. If they were, I don't think I'd talk about them. PETA. Anyway, that's it. So thanks again for listening. This will probably be the last one that's this long. I just don't care for editing. I think the smaller chunks are working better. So again, thank you so much for listening. Stay happy. See you next week.